I'm going to be gentle in my debate, but I do think I'll be able to pull ahead a win today, although I understand that Rick was going to try, and he probably already is. He said he was going to sneak in and disconnect my computer and then hand out his talk on paper. And that would probably lead to a clear-cut victory. So he may have done that already, we're seeing now. It looks like he's winning. So, just to get into it, since I just consumed a little of my 20 minutes. This is Wikipedia, which is probably the best model for what I'm talking about, but not the only model. And how does Wikipedia work? Who's been to Wikipedia? There you go. Everybody's been. Even my opponent has been to Wikipedia. So Wikipedia usually, if you look at it carefully, the way it's set up is that there is an article page that's at the top there that you see that's labeled lung cancer. And you can see the tab at the top that says article. And then to the side of that tab is another tab called talk. And that's where all the discussion takes place about the article. This system started in 2001 with Sanger and I think it's Wiley, I can't remember the other guy's name. They have a little bit of conflict about who was the founder or whether they were co-founders. But it started in 2001, and it now contains, in 15 years, 4 million articles, separate articles that are being discussed constantly. 1,500 new articles are being presented a month on this site. And the system does have some rules, but the fact of the matter is it's being done predominantly through crowdsourcing, which was their intent when they started it out. All of the people are discussing these in the talks, and if you go in the talks, you can see, like there's an example where there's a little debate going on about what should be included, what edits should be made in the article. And this is really the power of it. But it does have some rules. There are 3 rules that run Wikipedia. All edits must include a neutral point of view. And if you think about these rules as I go through them, think about how we run a journal and how we do the articles that Alec just talked about. There has to be a neutral point of view. You must convey information fairly, proportionately, and as far as possible without bias. The second standing rule is no original research. Now that obviously doesn't apply to a journal, but it does apply to this source, and it's what we would also use in a textbook. You don't do research in the textbook, you present conclusions in the textbook. And so on Wikipedia, you cannot present facts, allegations, or ideas for which no reliable published sources exist. In fact, you can't even do an analysis of published sources. If you want to take a summary of, say, 3 or 4 different articles and present your own interpretation of those articles, that's not allowed on Wikipedia. And editors will identify that and remove it. And then the third thing is it must be verifiable. All the items that are shown on Wikipedia have to have a resource outside of Wikipedia that can be verified, either on the internet. In fact, if you go to the history of Wikipedia on the site, there's a story of a guy who got on there in England, bought a bunch of medals from eBay, took a picture of himself, and purported himself to be a knighted British military officer. In fact, he was able to play this game to the point where he was invited to charity balls and was introduced as Sir and Lady McAllifrey. Well, it was found out within a few months on Wikipedia, actually, and he was ousted. The guy has continued to lie. He's called himself now a magician, and he's rebranded himself as a property tycoon. So he has a sort of an urge. But that concept that you can't get away with a lie for too long on Wikipedia, even when it's crowdsourced and not editorially covered, is actually true. That Wikipedia, despite the fact that it's open, despite that it now has 4 million articles, which if you converted that into Encyclopedia Britannica volumes, that's 2,000 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica that are now held on this thing. So if we converted something like that to what I'm imagining for a textbook, this is sort of the way I would see it. One of the big problems with any wiki site is the development of the content. And so rather than relying on crowdsourcing, where obviously our crowd is much smaller than the globe that Wikipedia relies on, we would use an existing textbook as a foundation. Because once we have that textbook, we have all the references from that textbook, we have all the artwork and the images from that textbook, and we can immediately adapt that textbook to a form that fits our curriculum, what we think our learners need to know. And that gets embedded into articles. And now the articles would mirror our curriculum. And if you've been to the thoracic surgery curriculum, you realize that the chapters that are developed don't always conform cleanly to the way our residents want to learn. And most of our residents want to learn in small chunks. And some of these chapters are very large and very broad, and they cover very many topics very elegantly, but it's too much information when you're just trying to focus on a specific aspect of learning. And so with the Wiki site, we can develop as many chapters in any format that we want to mirror completely our curriculum. And each article will have an editor. Now, some editors will be responsible for many articles, many sections of the curriculum, obviously. But the point is that unlike Wikipedia, where it will be completely crowdsourced, ours will have a checkpoint with an editor. And the editor will function much like an author. But in addition to that, each page or each article would have a talk page that accompanies it. And that's completely open to the entire community of surgeons in the United States, in Canada, in the globe, essentially. And so the sorts of discussions that are going on right here, right now, during this 2-day meeting, could go on virtually online at all times on any chapter or any section of the textbook that we produce. But unlike Wikipedia, only the editor will have the power of modifying the article. So we will constrain what gets onto the final article. The talk can go on completely uncontrolled on the backside. And actually, most individuals would find the talk very engaging, just like we enjoy a discussion like we had yesterday when we talked about the pulmonary nodules or the esophageal cases of the advanced lung cancer. And then what we could set up, and this is obviously all fluid and will be adaptable, is some sort of management system or timing for the editors. Maybe they will, when there's a certain target volume of talk has become present on a certain article, then that article will need to be revised. Or we'll do it in a scheduled fashion. Every 2 years, every 4 years, every article gets revised, whether there's talk present on it or not. And we would use the editors in order to do that, much like we would write a new version of a textbook. Well, what else can we take advantage of? One of the most powerful features of Wikipedia, if you've gone there, is all those little blue links in any of the articles that you see. So you're not stuck on a single article. If, as you're reading the article, one of the words is highlighted blue, that takes you to a related article somewhere else in Wikipedia. So you can literally surf Wikipedia for knowledge that's specific to your needs. And that ability to open smaller focused articles and then link them all is what makes Wikipedia much more powerful than any sort of print version. Because in a print version, you're going to have to go back to the index, look it up, and then go back to that site. Whereas from Wikipedia, I can jump directly into related articles and move back and forth seamlessly. And in addition, the ability to add video or images or any sort of multimedia is actually part and parcel to the idea of building one of these sites. There's no additional cost to this except for bandwidth. Well, why is it better? Why am I debating about it? Well, I think there's a number of reasons why I think it can be better. This is probably the first and foremost. Knowledge is advancing exponentially. The graph in the top left is Gordon Moore, his comment about Moore's law. Who knows Moore's law? So Moore's law says that a processor, its speed in terms of the number of transistor density has been increasing by a doubling factor every 18 months. And right there is the graph, and that's a log scale on the left of that graph, showing the processing power of Intel chips. Gordon Moore was one of the founders of Intel. But what's interesting about Gordon's law is it doesn't apply just to processor speed. It actually applies to everything. The next thing is a graph I created going to the US Patent Office website and pulling out the number of utility patents that have been awarded by year since the foundation of the utility patent. And again, it's plotted as a logarithmic scale. And as you can see, there is an exponential growth in the number of patents being filed. And this is increasing rapidly, not just in something as blunt as patents, but in a book by, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. He does Engines of Our Ingenuity. Who listens to that radio program on NPR? It's a John Lienhart. John Lienhart does it. And in his book, How Invention Begins, he looked at other elements, more specific elements of development. Things like the speed at which we travel. If you go back to a wheelbarrow, and then to cattle-drawn carts, and then to horseback riding, and then to trains, and then to automobiles, and now into rockets, what you see is the speed at which humans can move across the Earth is also increasing exponentially. We're getting faster and faster and doubling every dozen or few dozen years. And so, by contrast, if you look at just Shield's General Thoracic Surgery text, this is page numbers. And as you can see, I've plotted it there logarithmically. We haven't had much change logarithmically in the number of pages available in Shield's or in any of our textbooks. And I don't think you can make the assumption that we haven't learned a lot more about thoracic surgery in the 25 or 35 years that are present there on the Shield's textbook. It's done a phenomenal job, but I think that the pace of advancing knowledge is far outstripping the technology of a paper-driven textbook. And it's not just how fast our knowledge is expanding. We're not just developing new ways to travel. You have to learn more to be able to get to the basic level of knowledge in any topic. The graph on the left is the age of Nobel laureates since they started handing out the Nobel Prizes. And what's been noticed for a while now is that the average age of a Nobel laureate has been increasing steadily since the development of the prize in every area. And the reason for that is obvious. In order to learn everything you know about a field so you can get to that edge where you can break new ground is taking more and more time. Just think about what your children are learning in 5th and 6th grade and what you learned in 5th and 6th grade. The amount of knowledge that has to be learned before you get to that cutting edge, to that edge of our knowledge understanding, is greater and greater. Another example is the total citations in Medline, and you can see how that's increasing exponentially as well. And this is not knowledge that you can ignore everything that came before it. You need to know a significant amount of what came before in order to understand the new stuff. It's just not all brand new. In addition to the expansiveness of knowledge, there's also a phenomenon called the democratization of knowledge. Who knows who these two people are? I've got a couple of hints for you. Oh, you know it back there. All right, Fred does. Here's a couple of hints. One of them dropped out of high school. The other one never received a diploma. They never attended college. They lived in a small Midwest town and they ran a bicycle shop. Does anybody know who they are now? Yeah, they're the Wright brothers, all right? Never went to college. They didn't understand anything about aerodynamics. They didn't invent the wind foil. That was invented before. There were plenty of people who were gliding and running gliders. They didn't invent the combustion engine. They didn't invent any of that. They didn't even invent the bicycle. But they understood principles and they were able to read through democratization of knowledge. When Gutenberg first developed the printing press, the entire amount of books on the planet in 1450 was 1 million. In 50 years, there was 50 million books on the planet. He increased the number of books with the printing press 50-fold. That was the first democratization of knowledge, because prior to that, those 1 million books were housed in very elite locations, usually in the church or in very, very wealthy individuals. Once the books became available, suddenly there was this plethora of books being spread out all over the world. And then the next step for democratization of knowledge was the library. When Carnegie and others began building libraries all over the country, that's when people like Wilbur and Orville Wright could learn about aerodynamics. They could go check out a book and actually learn everything that there was about a topic without attending college, without doing any of these. Everybody who got here owes something to Wilbur and Orville Wright, and they learned it outside of an institute of higher learning. This concept that knowledge exists in areas of higher learning and then is graciously distributed to the rest of us is gone. The ability to get at knowledge from wherever it is the way that we have to go about teaching now. On the next slide, I'll show you an example of that as it's going on right now. Again, I'm taking a risk here because I'm using technology and this may fall flat on my face. Oh my gosh, it worked. So what you see here, each one of these dots that is appearing is in real time somebody editing a page on Wikipedia. The size of the dot represents the size of the edit. The name in the middle is what's going on. And during various times of the day, this ranges from anywhere from 60 to about 100 edits per minute. So about 1 to 1.5 edits per second, all over the planet is going on. If you look at the worldwide Wikipedia site, there are over 45 million separate articles in about 100 different languages, which represents something like 14,000 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, obviously, some of them are kind of silly. And that's not what I'm trying to game. I don't want us, our community of surgeons, to put silly stuff out there, but the concept that you can crowdsource and that knowledge is being developed all over the planet, the concept that 1 or 2 individuals or even a group of about 20 individuals can keep track of all the knowledge by themselves is impossible when you see what's going on over here. You can go back. The last one is how to disseminate our, well, it's not actually the last one, there's one more. How do we disseminate ideas? This is the method that our trainees and most of us will receive ideas. This is where they're going, all right? And this is like this, all right? I mean, Google is no different than this. Our residents are drinking from this fire hose, all right? They are going to Google on their way to a case and they're Googling whatever they can find. There is no editorial vetting of this content. It just comes at them like a fire hose. And this is the generation they're born in. All right, and this is the generation that all of our children will be born in and will be used to, the idea of instantaneous receipt of knowledge. No one's going to wait for this stuff anymore. They want it now. They want it when they wanted it 10 minutes ago. And so we're going to have to compete with this, whether we like it or not. This is the model we're going to have to compete with, because if we don't build them a product that is at least as fast as this, they will go to this in deference to anything that we provide for them. And then I'll give my final argument, and I think it's the strongest. Everybody here has probably written a book chapter. I think it's incredibly frustrating to understand that the companies own our content, our intelligence. They own it, they distribute it. A wiki system would allow us to own it completely. We would have all rights for it. We could use it as we please, where we want. This, if any other, ignore all my other arguments, this is the most powerful argument for moving forward with some sort of a wiki system. Because if we don't take control of it, then things like what just happened, and I'm not rampant on Shields, I love Shields, I studied it, but if you look at the Shields 7th edition, it was 2,600 pages. Shields 6th edition was 3,000 pages. Now, I don't know what the reasons were in that, but I'm sure that part of the reasons have to do with the cost of producing a book that large. And so instead of an educational rationale deciding the size of the textbook from which our trainees will learn, there was an economic rationale applied to the size of the textbook on which we learn. And I understand that, but if they built a larger text point, the price point was going to change, sales were going to go down. I get it. They want to make sure that it's at the right cost to distribute it. But that's not a model we can use going forward, not with the other 4 arguments that I made. And I think that, if anything, us owning that knowledge, something that we put our blood, sweat, and tears in to produce, is probably the strongest argument to go forward with some model like this. We're not going to get it right from the get-go, but we are. To close, somebody told me I should put Rick's picture there on the left. I wasn't going to do that. I thought that was kind of mean. But I will say that what we're being asked to do is to rent the model on the left, because the books go out of date and then we have to go buy a new one. It's no different than leasing the textbooks, right? We're going to have to keep going back and tapping that. On the other hand, I'm selling you outright so you can own it, the thing on the right, and I promise I'll upgrade it anytime I need to. So thank you very much.